I request Rajesh, come, we'll have group photograph. Yes, I'll request Yashpal Mendiratta ji from Group Captain. Aye, sir. Guruji has to leave. Mr. Vidilingam, Hindu Sangam, Malaysia. Prasanna Chaturvedi ji. Swami ji, Prasanna Chaturvedi ji from South. We thank Guruji for blessing us on this occasion. He has to leave. He has a very urgent program at Rohini. With this program will continue. I request all the guests. Mr. Chandok will be the first speaker. Mr. Chandok. Yeah. We have Dr. J.P. Gupta and Mahesh Gupta ji, Bharat ji and Gautam ji. They have done lot of, we acknowledge their presence and thank them for their support on this call. Thank you. Friends, we will continue our
My dear dignitaries on the dais from all parts of the world, doing what they can do for the human existence with dignity, and all of you here in the auditorium, a very good evening to begin with. And after having the blessings of Guruji, I think we could begin doing something what he is very fond of. The assertion of human as the supreme against all creation and resulting significance of human rights discourse is not uncontested. In other words, it's inherently to be based on premises of human beings must be considered as center or above all aspects. This notion can be seen having its roots in many religious cultures illustratively. The Old Testament, which propounds the view that God has given man the domain over all other creatures, consequently paved way for the belief in dignity and moral worth of every human being, which is fundamental to the ideas of human rights. Every man, except the unfortunate few, can speak, express his ideas, move about, associate with others, pray to God, and in the olden times occupy a vacant land and irk about livelihood. These capacities exist in a man without any aid from the state. Indeed, the free use of such and other capacities inherent in a man is necessary for the development of his personality. Human rights, as we all know, are those rights which inhere in every human being by virtue of being a person. There is nothing but a modern name that what has been traditionally called natural rights or rights bestowed upon human beings by nature. Human rights are based on mankind's increasing demand of a decent civilized life in which an inherent dignity of each human being is well respected and protected. Human rights are fundamental to our very existence, without which we cannot live as human beings. And if we go to the history of this country, right from after the independence and we had our constitution, the Supreme Court of this country, apart from the people like all of you who have been participated in the basic human rights, has dealt with Article 21 of the Constitution and has stretched it, in my respectful summation, to the extent that wherever they thought that the life of human being was in danger by any way or any means, they said the dignity must come in. And consequently, it had a constitutional mandate that it must be honored. Not only we did this, even people who have come to our territory who have been otherwise aliens, the courts have taken view that under Article 21, we must be able to look at this from it, because after all, dignity of human being, irrespective where he stays, has to be paramount. If you go to the preamble of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it states, and I quote, "It is essential if a man is not to be compelled to have recourse as a last resort to rebellion against oppression, that human rights should be protected by rule of law. And probably that's the philosophy under which the Supreme Court has been dealing with this day in and day out. Right from, if you go back to the history, we have all known that about it. I need not specify that. In the 20th century, we had seen a sophisticated form of scientific brutality. Hitler and Stalin did away not only with the millions of innocent people in times of war and peace, but by means of mass media, torture, and a system of espionage, they tried to condition the minds of people and made them admit and accept the punishments of crimes they never committed. This unprecedented holocaust of life disturbed the decent human mind, and the combined international reaction got reflected in United Nations Charter of 1945. Then came the Universal Declaration of 1948, proclaimed by the General Assembly, with call to all states to respect such rights. Supported by various and several international conventions and treaties, those include cultural, economical, and political rights, such a right to life, liberty, education, and equality before law, and right of association, belief, free speech, information, nationality. Proclamation of these rights is not binding on any country, but they serve as a standard of concern for people and form the basis of many human constitutions. Although they were defined first by a Scottish philosopher, and absolute moral claims of entitlements to life, liberty, and property, and best known expression of human rights is that. Without even going into the question with respect to the same, to my mind, all persons of Indian descent living outside India, as long as they preserve some major Indian ethno-cultural characteristics, need to live with dignity. It is noteworthy that only nationals of Pakistan and Bangladesh are excluded from this term, since these once formed part of what we call the Greater India. The basic notion of secularism, which is the main thread of our constitution, goes to stand by any person or group whose human rights are violated by states, despite different measures taken by the governments, non-government and international institutions, including the institution which is organizing this. Several violations of human rights against members of the Indian communities are resulting all over the world. I need not go into many details of that. The foremost which comes to me is a person who even wears, for example, Indian origin, is not given the same priority and parity when it comes to job, when it goes to other parts of the world. Look at the latest controversy that has arisen in Eastern Europe, where people were not allowed to go in and the child was not admitted in the school, or a person was not allowed to go in to join a service only because he happened to wear a turban. Turban became his position. If you recall, the parents of 4 Muslim primary school girls decided to withdraw their daughters from the school because they were not allowed to wear what we call is a Muslim handscarf, which is contrary to their educational policy. Some might frame this as a religious freedom issue, but surely right to wear a religious dress is a facet of a free religious practice. But religious freedom is qualified by consideration of public order, morality, and health. This is the case in which you could have litigated in Singapore, but it is not. What is interesting is that certain Malaysian politicians, for example, began to issue catcalls across the causeway to condemn Singapore's human rights performance in relation to its Muslim minority, departing from the non-intervention in international affairs of the party line. A pressing need can also be felt against the routine affairs relating to rights of migrants and issues relating to migration. Astonishingly, in the Gulf region, for example, there is no ceiling for recruitment of domestic help, such as gardeners, cooks, housemaids, bearers, and such other personnel. In fact, there have been an unfortunate mismatch of a large scale of unemployment in India and enormous demand from them in the Gulf. The result has been a tendency on the part of employers in some countries in the region to treat domestic help with scant regard for their welfare. You would have seen this morning's paper where Neeru Malhotra has been accused by a US court for torturing a maid in the United States, notwithstanding that the maid had probably run away 2 days prior to his passport, her passport was to get over. The question that I'm posing for your consideration is only one. Irrespective of what caste, color or creed I belong to, irrespective which land do I stand on, am I entitled to live with dignity? And should these states come heavily on me, should these states not give me that protection, like we have given protection under Article 21, even to our aliens, to see that our Indians or people with Indian origin are not subjected to any kind of disadvantage in those countries, any kind of where their human rights get violated. And I'm proud to tell you, at least what little information, there are very great luminaries sitting on the dais and in the audience. I don't think there's any field in this world where Indians have not shown their own talent. They have shown in practice, they have shown in theory that they can be the best in the world. To give you an example to which community I belong as a lawyer, if you ask me about 10 or 15 years ago, one would have never thought lawyer from in India, or maybe 20 years ago, a lawyer from India would form part of every law firm in the world. But today we are proud to tell you that there is not a single law firm in the world. Law firm, I mean firm with some stability, some experience, which means something, where Indian lawyers are not there, helping them out to solve international problems. So if such Indians are outside their own field, ready to help those people out in their countries, should they not live with dignity? And when on one hand we all talk, we meet on treaties, we do everything else, but should governments not put their heads together to see how this globalization, where we are now calling world to become a village, should each one of us, irrespective of color and creed, should not live with the same dignity? Why could there not be one constitution in the world, at least for the dignity of human life, which is created